Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by award-winning author, medical lab technologist Julie Rowe. Julie has some interesting writings because she integrates her experiences as a medical lab technologist into her writing. And she even jokes that in order for the stories that she does to make it to the page, it has to be believable fiction. So we're going to be talking to her about how she integrates that and how why she decided to do so and everything that she's going to be up to in the future. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Curtis.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I live in Canada. Until recently, I lived in a city called Fort McMurray, which is not quite at the 60th parallel, but still pretty far north. In fact, the highway ends north of us, and you can't go any farther. Before that, though, I worked in the Northwest Territories, so way up north where the sun is out all summer and then you hardly see it at all in the winter. And it made for an interesting place to work because of the isolation there. As I said, it's dark all the time in the winter. So it's an odd place because people come there for different reasons. And some of them go there to get away from things and not always good things. So it wasn't odd to have someone come up there because they were in trouble with the law. It wasn't odd to have people come up there because they were avoiding their responsibilities. It was a weird place, actually. Um, we had several suicides there. People go as far as the bus would take them and then they would take their life. So really strange sometimes, especially in the winter. And when I say I can't use the things that I see in regular everyday work, it's because people do a lot of things that are not smart, but fictional characters have to be smart. Readers don't like it when their characters are really dumb and do something stupid. And in fact, they will stop reading a book for that reason. So even though people are dumb and they do things at home that ends up injuring them, you can't actually use that stuff in a book. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work for readers at all. In fact, if you read reviews, sometimes you will see the acronym for too stupid to live. And that's something they will say about characters that have done something really dumb. I don't know if you've heard of the Darwin Awards, where it's a list of how people have killed themselves because of doing something stupid. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You just can't write about what you see every day at the hospital because so much of it is just nobody's thinking about what they're doing or what they should be doing, and then they end up injuring themselves. One of my kids is an x-ray tech and sees every shift somebody who has injured themselves on an e-bike or an e-scooter in the city. Someone who never has used one, but they're visiting and they use one to go on a look around and see the sights and end up breaking their arm or their leg. Happens daily. There are now laws being brought in to say that they're actually illegal in some places to ride because there's so many people that get hurt. And that's a problem because when you're when you're writing fiction, you want to have something exciting happening. And a lot of the accidents that come into hospitals are, in fact, exciting. But again, they're the result of people doing something dumb, and you can't really put it in a book. So I have to take some of that, of those experiences and think, okay, how could this work and still keep my character smart? And occasionally I have to sit down with a friend and kind of brainstorm around it until I can find a legitimate reason why someone would do something dumb. So it can be a challenge sometimes, but I really enjoy doing that. I find that when I'm writing about my bioterrorism novels, a lot of what happens in a hospital can be transferred to fiction because it's procedural. There's laws in place, governments have policies, there are different departments in governments that handle these things. And so it's not so difficult to use those. But it's funny that I wrote a series of 5 books called the Outbreak Task Force series based on every book has a different pathogen and they become a problem. They spread, they cause disease and death, and the government and the CDC have to react and do something about it and find a cure or a vaccine or a treatment. And I wrote all these books before COVID. The last one came out just as COVID we were about 6 months into COVID. And I tried to pick pathogens that were realistic, that I thought, could this become a problem? Yes. Okay. How would that work? So I took the whole issue of, say, hantavirus, which killed Gene Hackman. He's an actor in the United States. And I took that and I imagined what would happen if this virus became a problem. And that's what I explored through the story. And then I had no idea that it would become a problem now in real life, and here it is. I also explored measles becoming a problem, and it's a problem this year, really bad. Even in Canada, it's actually worse where I am. We have as many people infected with measles as in the entire United States in the province of Alberta. So, and it's odd because I got an email from a person who's read my books, and the gentleman said, "I want to thank you for writing your books because as he went through COVID, he wasn't as scared, he wasn't as anxious because he knew what to expect because he read my fictional imaginings of what could happen with different infectious diseases." And I have to tell you, that's the best compliment I've ever been paid, was to know that I lowered his anxiety, that I made him feel more comfortable and confident about what was happening in the world because he knew what to expect, which, like, wow. Like, I was really surprised. And and I have to say that that's kind of the fine thing you want to get to when you're writing fiction. You want it to feel like it could be real, but it isn't. You want someone to read it and go, wow, okay, that could happen, even though you've made it all up. And that is really hard to get to when you're writing, is to find that very narrow strip between believability and being it unbelievable. I also think it's interesting to note how when you live up north in an isolated place, your thinking is quite different. You think long term. You go to a major grocery store probably once a quarter, so every 3 or 4 months. And so you think of all the things you're going to need in those 3 or 4 months. that you're probably not going to have access to. So you have to buy it all now. And so your whole attitude towards living up north is quite different from living in a major city or within an easy drive of a major city because you're always thinking ahead. What am I going to need 6 months from now? Will I be able to come and get this? No. How much does it cost to send it to me? Can I afford it? And so people tend to hoard different things. They certainly bring in a lot of food. And and what do they do for a hobby? That too is an issue. There's just no stores. There's nothing available. So you have to find ways to get what you need to keep yourself busy and and your own happiness because it's just not available there.
Well, for listeners who might not be aware, explain what a medical lab technologist does.
A lab technologist takes your blood and also urine samples, stool samples. We collect all of these things and we do tests on them to try and identify what's abnormal, what's normal, because that information helps the doctor figure out what might be wrong with you. Or maybe you're completely normal, which is good. We all want that. But the testing that we do gives them the information that they need for a lot of diseases. We
Okay, well,
also do cross matches. So if you are in a surgery and you need blood, we're the people that match your blood to a unit so that you can get that safely. We do a lot of very different things. ECGs to check your heart, all kinds of tests.
okay. Well, since you have a very interesting writing style, explain to the listeners what you do and how you handle writer's block.
Oh, writer's block is nasty. Nobody likes it. And often it happens to people in the middle of writing a book. They might run out of ideas, especially if they're just starting with one idea and they haven't outlined. They kind of get lost about 50 pages in, and then they're like, oh, now what do I do? And they're kind of written into a corner. And so I always tell people who are dealing with writer's block, look at the scene that you're currently writing or you've just written or wherever you've come to where your block starts and rewrite that theme, that scene from another character's point of view. So if you're writing from the hero's point of view, try writing it from the villain's point of view. And often that change of perspective can get you right out of writer's block. You all of a sudden now you've got ideas because you're looking at the story from a different character's perspective, and that perspective just opens things up for you creatively. Another thing to do is stop where you are and say, okay, I'm stuck here, but I know I want something else to happen a little later in the book. So write that. Just carry on with what you know you're going to be doing later on. And then go back to that place where you were blocked and look at the story and see if you can find a way from there to the spot where you started writing ahead. Another thing to do is to brainstorm with other writers. Here I am. This is where I'm at. What do you guys think? There's no reason why you can't ask for suggestions or ideas. I frequently will even say to my editor, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do this. Do you have any thoughts? And often between the two of us, we manage to get through the writer's block like that. Um, the most important thing is to just keep writing it. It doesn't matter what it is. Write something else if you have to. Just walk away from that that project, that book, that story, and write something else and then come back. Often stepping away from it and getting a little bit more distance from it really helps as well. That's that being said, there's lots of people who do not write with an outline. They write by the seat of their pants, as we say, with no outline. Maybe they have one image in their mind and that's where their story starts and they just write from there. Everything is a surprise. They learn it as they go. And that works for some people, but other people want an outline. They actually want to know, they want to figure out in advance who their characters are, what their goals are, what the who the villain is, or who the hero is, and how did they get to be the person they are. And they have to figure all this out before they start writing. Some folks will write as much as an 80-page outline first, which I've never been able to do. My outlines usually run about 2 pages. I need to know my characters more than I need to know events because once I have my characters figured out, I make things happen to them that's sort of the worst thing that they could imagine for them. So if somebody is claustrophobic, I'm going to stick them in a closet or in a trunk somewhere where they're closed in and they have to deal with their fear and it's not comfortable. So I like to start with my characters and then I develop a plot from there. But there are so many ways to outline a book. You can do it like a screenwriter. You can only look at plot and worry about characters later. You can just think of, hey, is this a disaster book? Then it's one disaster after another. Is it all event driven like that? So there's really an endless number of opportunities. Try things. That's my favorite piece of advice for new authors. Try things. If you like it, great. Use it. If you don't use it. There's no, there's nobody there who can say you have to do it this way. There's a lot of unspoken rules in writing, but they're really not rules. They're guidelines, and there's a lot of rules that people talk about that just they don't actually exist.
Okay, well, let the listeners know who your favorite writer is, who is your biggest influences.
Oh my goodness. This is such a hard question because I like too many people. Um, I will tell you that if I want to read a story where it's a brand new world, it's something new and cool and very different from our world here, I read Ilona Andrews. Her ability to build a fictional world is unmatched. Unmatched. Just, it's as easy as breathing. And yet I've never read another writer who does it so effortlessly. Amazing stuff. She has a brand new story out called The Inheritance. Just came out like 2 days ago. Marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. But if I'm reading for character growth, my favorite author is Nalini Singh. And wonderful, just her characters don't leave you. You feel like they're a friend when you read one of her books. And you want them to succeed at their goals. You're literal. I have had my husband going, "Why are you crying?" Because something good has happened or something bad has happened. But her characters are just so well developed and so interesting in how she does it that it really grabs my heart and makes me want to read till 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh my goodness. Who else do I want to mention? Uh, Gee whiz. There's a gal named Jane Ann Krantz who writes under three names, which is confusing, but she writes three different genres of books. So that's why she has three names. So Jane Ann Krantz is modern day romantic suspense. Jane Castle is fantasy and science fiction romance. And Amanda Quick is historical romance. She's very prolific, writes a lot of books in a year, and they're all wonderful, but because of the genre changes, she has three different names.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Well, tell the listeners about your books that you have written. Tell us what we can expect when we read them and where we can get them.
Okay. Most of my books, actually all of them, are available on Amazon, and most of them are available in other online retailers like Apple and Kobo and Barnes and Noble and stuff. I have some books in audio. So if you like to listen, check me out on Audible and audiobooks. Trying to think. My current series, and I have my next book is out on the 28th of August, is about a family of vampires, but they're not magic. They have an autoimmune disorder. And they're different. That if you read my reviews, and the series is called Sinners Never Die, you'll see the phrase a different take on the vampire genre repeated often because they aren't magic. They're regular people who have a disease that prevents them from growing old and dying. And the fourth book, called Cherished by the Sinners, is out at the end of this month. If you want to have a look at my website, it's julieroweauthor.com, and all of my books are listed there as well as audiobooks. I've been writing since 2001. My first book came out in 2011, and I've got 20 novels and 8 anthologies out now.
Okay, we'll talk.
I'm trying to count.
No,
Am I counting them right? Maybe.
Okay, we'll talk to the listeners about, did you choose to self-publish or go through a traditional publisher, and any first-time advice or advice you would give a first-time author?
Okay, I have done both self-publishing and working with a publisher. I worked with Harlequin on 8 books. I also worked with Entangled Publishing on 7 books. And I have done 5, 9, 10 books on my own. So there's the business operates the same no matter which way you go. So one of the pluses to working with a publisher is that there's a built-in market for your book. If you go self-publishing from the start, you're putting out a book into a very busy market. There's a lot of new books published every month, and it is difficult to get your book in front of a reader so that they can even have a look at it and buy it. It's very difficult. So when you work with a publisher, that part of marketing is kind of helping you out because they already have an audience. Readers already know about them and what they publish and are probably buying their stuff. And so that is a real big help. But self-publishing means you have more control over your story. You have control over the content of your story, the editing. You have control over how long it is. You have control over even the names of the characters because when you work with a publisher, sometimes they have all that control. I have had to change character names because the publisher asked me to. Not that I wanted to, but it's like, sure, I guess I don't want to cancel my whole contract. So yeah, I'll change a name. But when you self-publish, you have all that control. You get to design the cover or work with a graphic artist to design a cover. You get to decide when it comes out, where it comes out. Like, is it just going to be on Amazon or are you going to go, as we say, wide, where it's on Apple Books and Kobo and Barnes and Noble and everywhere? Those are all things you get to decide as a self-publisher, but it's a lot of work to do all of that. You ask my assistant how many hours she puts in and how many hours I put in trying to keep up with marketing, my newsletter, writing the next book, and then all the things you do for a book release. I list my books on NetGalley so that reviewers can find it and read it. And if you're a reader and you are a serious reader, NetGalley is a great place to find great books to read that don't cost you any money because the the understanding is that if you request a book on NetGalley and you're given a copy that you will review it somewhere. But that again, you have to have all your formatting done. You have to load it up online everywhere. There's a lot of little jobs coming to that go with self-publishing. And some writers don't have the time or they don't want to devote the time to doing all of that stuff. So have a sit down. What does your schedule look like? Do you have a day job? Those things are important questions to check because maybe you don't have time to self-publish. Maybe a publisher is the way to go if that is the case. But I know some authors who used to work with publishers who now self-publish because, quite frankly, they make a lot more money. Publishers take quite a bit of a cut. So that's another consideration is having a little more of the income coming directly to you. So when you're writing and you're thinking about, okay, I've got a book done, I'm ready to start looking at how to publish my book, you need to consider your schedule, your daily life. How much time do you have for all of the things outside of writing the story? That marketing, everything else that you have to do in order to publish that book and be successful because you don't want to have it published and then five people buy it. That's not fun. I've seen people who have had to, that's what's happened to them, and it's quite demoralizing. So be prepared to do a lot of work if you're going to self-publish in order to be successful. And if you work with a traditional publisher, you have to be patient because they have a much longer schedule than you will if you were doing it yourself. It might take a year to 2 years for your book to become published if you work with a traditional publisher. Lots of things to think about, lots of things. Do not forget to get your story well edited, because you can be an absolutely fabulous writer. You still make mistakes, you still spell things wrong, you still drop words in the middle of sentences. Every writer needs a good editor, every single one.
Well, besides your book coming out here at the end of the month, tell us about any other upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Oh, I do teach online. I teach right now, I'll be teaching in October for a writing group called Sisters in Crime. They are an international mystery thriller writing group, and their specific chapter called The Guppies, which are relatively new writers. And I teach a couple of workshops for them every year, usually. And I'm going to be teaching a workshop called Love Your Voice in October, which is all about figuring out who you are as a writer, what your personality on paper is. So we discuss things like personal themes. Are you good at dialogue or action? Or are you really good at describing things? We're looking at how to figure out what you do well and what things you might want to work on as you continue with your writing. It's a really nice course because I'm a positive reinforcement instructor. So I can't wait to tell you what you're doing right. That's my first goal is to figure out, holy cow, you do dialogue amazing. And then I get you to focus on that because when you focus on what you do well instead of what you don't, that's when your writing comes alive. That's where you discover your voice. So check out Sisters in Crime, the Guppies group, if you want to join me in October for that class.
All right. And the website again is julieroweauthor.com. So close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if that was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Yeah, I'm not that old. I'm 58, but I've discovered something in the last 10 years, and that's to do something that makes me happy every day. And if you do that, your life just opens up. It just becomes more joyful. Live in your moment. Do something that makes you happy every day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, julieroweauthor.com. Please be sure to check out Julie's books and her newsletter and pick up the book at the end of the month. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Julie has a lot of interesting writings, especially as a medical lab technologist. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and visit www.curveball337.com for more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Julie, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your writings, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Curtis. This was a lot of fun.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.